This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
All right, so how many of you here ever thought you'd come here and talk from a statistician? I mean, that's almost terrible. So I'm flattered that you would all come, and I appreciate that because, you know, as they say, statistician sort of rhymes with mortician, and you never want to go spend too much time with those guys. So again, thank you very much.
More than once.
Right, at least not more than once. So again, I thank you all for coming, and I certainly thank Jordan and Hearn for providing this wonderful format to offer these kinds of talks and speeches and so forth, and discussion groups, because they're just fantastic. So really a big round of applause for Jordan for even putting the whole library idea together. Briefly about my background, I sort of mentioned statistician, but I really don't consider myself much of that anymore, although I still do a little bit of stat work for people. I really have transitioned pretty well and completely into the energy medicine field. My background, at least academically, was in mathematics and applied statistics, a bachelor's degree in mathematics and then a master's degree in statistics. And I went on to work for Hewlett-Packard right out of graduate school as an applied statistician. Now, the kind of stat work I did was not, you know, econometric type of statistics. It was not, you know, more financial type statistics. It was all production design, research design type statistics. So there we're doing a lot of work with statistical quality control, design of experiments, you know, simulation studies, a lot of marketing and customer research, things of that nature. And during that tenure with Hewlett-Packard, I actually shortly before joining Hewlett-Packard, I came upon the work of W. Edwards Deming, a guy you may have heard about, or some of you may have heard about, especially in the industrial community. But talking about how statistics can be used in a whole different way in the industry, environment, and really for that matter in any organization, whether it's a hospital or a business. And the impact that could have on not only the quality of the product or service that came out of that business, but how the entire business ran. So I was very influenced by that. And as time went on, we tried to incorporate some of these ideas in HP, and with some success. And I became further and further interested in the whole idea of systems thinking, the work from Russell Ackoff, certainly the work from many, many people in the systems thinking field. I just drew a blank on the gentleman's name I was thinking of, there's Peter Schultes and there's gentleman, anyway, it'll come to me. But it was fascinating how one could look at an organization much more holistically. And it wasn't from an energy medicine perspective at all at that stage, because I hadn't even heard of the word at that time. I mean, I couldn't even spell it. But in those days, thinking more holistically about an organization and how it could work, tying in the notions of spirit and what that meant for leadership and so forth, I thought was very, very fascinating. I got eventually into some leadership positions, changed companies a couple of different times in the high-tech arena since then in that 21-year career, and found it very fascinating to apply, again, a lot of these type of thinking. But I became frustrated with the way a lot of organizations, especially the last few, worked with the whole notion of quality and of product and service. And so I decided to start my own organization, and I did. I resigned from the position I had back in 2000 and started a new company manufacturing and producing very high-end stationary power machinery for the woodworking and metalworking industries. This was aimed largely at small shops. There was quite a void, and still is quite a void in that arena for really, you know, very high-end quality product that's being made. Again, it has nothing to do with energy medicine. But 2 years into the whole thing, having founded the organization, actually a year into the whole thing, all the financial, you know, backing was there. The business plan had been long done. I had secured several people to hire into the business. I had just given verbal offers to a top engineer, had lease space ready to move into. Business insurance was all set up. In other words, everything was ready to press the go button. And on the way back from a customer research visit, I got this very strong impression, very sick feeling in my stomach, very strong impression you're not supposed to be doing this. I've never really had physical sensations like that, but got quite sick. And so figured that, all right, I need to sit down and listen to this whole thing and figure out what's going on. And it turned out I wasn't really supposed to go into this sort of thing, but it left me in a huge vacuum. It was like, what do I do now? Up until that point in time, and several years before that, I had started studying intuition medicine, or energy medicine. And that was just sort of out of an interest, but my wife was really the one that kind of led me into that. She was very interested in that kind of work, and went through this program that I went through a year ahead of me, and her discussions about it seemed very fascinating. So I decided to, enroll in a couple of the introductory courses, and this is at the Academy of Intuitive Studies in Intuition Medicine down in Sausalito, California. And I found the work very, very interesting. It opened my eyes to a whole realm and a whole part of the world I have never had any sense of or any awareness of. And I was able to apply a lot of this work in the training to what I did in business. At that point, I was a quality manager with a high-tech firm. I found it helped me significantly in my own, everything from my own grounding to my own presence to my own ability to work with people, my own ability to set up space more effectively to make it more conducive for holding anything from meetings to creative type work. And in particular, I found it very, very helpful in my own work as a statistician. A lot of the problem solving and research work I did was amped up significantly by the help of by intuition, which to many people who are familiar with it would not be surprised by that, but I was certainly surprised by that. And what I thought were supposedly separate functions of analysis and intuition were really not separate functions whatsoever, but they're a unified part of our entire mind. And so I was quite intrigued by this, but at that stage I still felt energy medicine and the things I had learned. At that point I had graduated from the program with a master's in intuition medicine, and I was using the principles largely for myself. But I continued to tutor people, continued to take more graduate classes, and started to do more and more work with people outside the program. Just sort of happened naturally as I sort of heard about it, and referrals started coming in. And so a little over a year ago, I decided to go into it full time. And here I am today. So I've kind of gone from this route of sort of this whole science, math type background to a whole different realm of the world, so to speak, altogether. But I'm finding some very interesting parallels between statistical analysis type thinking and the energy medicine, which really wouldn't be too much of a surprise given the fact that we live in such a unified world. But it is interesting, a lot of the parallels, especially in a lot of your setup. It's so important when you do a design of an experiment that you design it well and you set it up properly. The same thing's very true in conducting an energy medicine, session or consultation with somebody. But enough of that. The quote I have up here in front of us, it's been up here for a while, is quite an interesting quote when I came upon it. And you look at that and you read it and you say, okay, if that's true, then what happened? And you got to go back a little over 3 centuries ago with Rene Descartes. You might remember old Rene, the philosopher. Long and short of the story is he cut a deal with the Pope. And the deal was that Rene was sort of the founding father, at least he's known to be the founding father of modern medicine. And his deal with the Pope at the time was, you give me bodies to be able to, basically cadavers that I could cut up and dissect and understand and learn more about the physical body, but I'll disassociate anything to do with spirit with the body. So he made a clean separation of the two. And he swore never to talk about spirit and its effect on the body and what impact it may or may not have, because the church wanted him out of the realm of anything spiritual. So that's had a huge influence not only on our modern medicine, but certainly in our science today. But one of the things about energy medicine for a lot of us, and it was that way for me when I first started getting into it, there was such a mystery involved with it. And there is for a lot of people today. So it's sort of akin to this slide here where it's where the miracle occurs that bothers a lot of people, is what is the miracle that's going on here? What is all this subtleness going on behind the reading and the actual benefit that was being given to people? By the way, let me interrupt myself quickly. You all should have a copy of the handout that has pretty much all the slides in it that I'm using tonight. There's a few it doesn't have, but that'll help you follow. If you don't have one, there's more copies, I think, in the back as well as up here.
I gave out all that I had.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so what do I propose to talk about tonight? Rather than jump right into this mystery of energy medicine and just sort of explain the way I practice it and the way I've been taught, I thought it might be helpful to kind of step back a little bit and look at some of the physics and some of the scientific thinking going on behind it. Not that one needs that to be able to practice it, and practitioners that have been doing this for thousands of years certainly did never need to have this understanding, but it may help us. So I'm going to start with looking at the world from the perspective of vibration and energy, which is really what we live in, and then follow that up quickly with the fact that we really are energy beings, and then how disease can get really transmitted into the body from outside the body. And then a brief look at some various different energy medicine modalities. There's a whole long list of them, but we'll look at a couple of those. I'm not going to spend any time talking about any particularly because of time, but we'll mention a few of those. And then focus specifically on intuition medicine. What is that? Which is really a branch or one of the modalities of energy medicine. And then if we have time at the end and the group would like to, we can maybe conduct a simple grounding meditation, but just to give you an experience of this if you've never had that before. But we'll see how our time goes with questions. My objective really tonight is really twofold. One is to remove some of the mystery behind what energy medicine is, that there really is a fair amount of science that's underlies or foundations the whole art and science. And that's really catching up with the energy medicine. It's not like energy medicine followed from it. It's catching up with understanding of what's going on with energy medicine. And my second objective is really to focus on introducing you to some things about intuition medicine. Now, my program that I went through here is it's a 2-year program plus additional graduate work that I've gone through. So I can't condense that too much of that down into 1 hour, but or a couple of hours. But I'll give you a good synopsis of what goes on there. And I invite your questions along the way if you have any. All right, so my premise tonight, we'll start with, is that we as human beings, and really all sentient beings for that matter, which includes our spirit, mind, body, and emotions, and really our vibrational patterns, we're simply energy. And we're existing in a vast sea of vibration. More simply put, we're simply energy fields existing in vast energy field. This notion of matter really doesn't, as we think of it as being solid type stuff, doesn't really exist at all. But that can be a difficult thing to kind of believe in or grasp. Well, let's take a look at this in a couple different parts. This notion of a multidimensional energy field. And we can thank William Tiller for a lot of the recent work in this area, as well as some other physicists. So we're going to jump into a little bit of physics here for a few minutes. Tiller's come up with this notion of a unified information field of vibration. Or what we're accustomed to is this whole notion of direct time and space. Basically the physical or material world that we live in today. And here you look at principally the 4 different dimensions we're accustomed to and that we're comfortable living within. But outside of that space is this huge reciprocal time space, as he calls it. You might call it a vacuum. Although our notion of a vacuum, as we might think of it as being a void of energy, is actually a misnomer here. This reciprocal time space out here is enormous in terms of its energy content. It's so vast and so large that the energy content inside our physical world would be considered nothing more than basically a whisper of what goes on out here. It's incredibly huge. But what resides out in this reciprocal time and space are all these different subtle energies. And the subtle energies are the things that our physics community can't really explain. It's incomplete understanding of what these different things are, such as all these different types of psychic phenomena, remote viewing, distance type learning, distance type viewing, inspirations that we might receive, all these kinds of things that go on in this cosmos around us, they would define as kind of subtle energies. So they reside out in this sort of space, and there's this constant interaction, of course, with the physical world. We all feel that and know that ourselves, whether it's interacting with somebody or communicating with somebody telepathically, or whether it's psychic notions, intuitions you may have, all that sort of thing resides out here and interfaces constantly back and forth. What Tiller has done for us is he's been able to describe this whole reciprocal time-space and its relationship to the direct time-space with an n-dimensional lattice, sort of a mathematical construct. But it's very neat and it's very mathematically elegant, and it provides a very interesting description of what's going on here. Not that this existed because of it, but our understanding of it is becoming much more complete. Inside of this whole reciprocal time-space is this thing called the Tashian domain. That's a domain in which energy actually travels faster than the speed of light. So that allows for the things like non-locality, which is where one thing is able to be in two different places at the same time. Accounts for explaining phenomena such as ESP and so forth. So it's a pretty fascinating area just as a, and this is a, I mean, if you brought in your ND glasses and put those on, you'd be able to see this much clearer, but this dimensional space out here, of course, is very vast. Yes?
They sell some kind of Tashian water and little things that you can wear. Is that related to that? Yeah. Is
I
it the
don't-
same thing?
It's tachyon and tashion. The same thing. She's wondering.
Yeah, I'm not, if they are, I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Does somebody else know the answer to that? Yeah, I'm not sure. So Tiller's unified theory helps us to be able to mathematically incorporate consciousness. Again, it provides, science is kind of catching up with this sort of notion. And it allows for this relationship between these subtle energies and, again, the physical world that we live in today. And again, if you ask people that have worked in this field for many, many years, and if you ask psychics or anybody, I mean, they would kind of say, you know, no kidding, we've known about this for thousands of years, and we certainly have. But again, our science is sort of catching up with this. And I think what it's helping with is that it's bringing more and more of the understanding of energy medicine and things like this, the phenomena such as ESP and even the possibility of UFOs and beyond the yacht sort of thing, is being more scientifically valid and being at least more accepted by mainstream as being there's something behind this besides just a bunch of woo-woo. All right, so that's back to our premise here. That's a quick kind of summary or synopsis of these multidimensional energy fields that we reside in. We are energy fields. What does that claim where does that sort of come from? Well, quantum physics has been teaching us for some time that all matter is energy existing as vibration. And where does that notion come from? Well, our past belief was that the atom was sort of the sacred icon for the foundation of life. And then with particle accelerators, we're able to split the atom. And after we split the atom, we found out that it's well over 99% just space. And as a kind of as a metaphor of this, if you were to consider the nucleus of an atom to be about the size of a medium-sized apple, let's place that apple here in Ashland. The first orbital of that atom, which is the first location of all the electrons, is going to be about in Indianapolis. Gives you an idea of just how vast that spatial difference is. And so indeed we are space. But then you say, what about the nucleus of the atom and the electrons themselves? Aren't they matter? Aren't they particles? Well, then they were able, with advanced accelerated particle accelerators, they were able to split the nucleus and the electrons, and we find out that they're not matter or particles at all either. Rather than what we define as vibrational interference patterns. So what we used to believe is sort of being rocked on its ear, if you will. Here's a quote from Capra in his book, The Tao of Physics. I'll let you read that. I don't need to read it to them. Can everybody see it in the back, or you have it?
Actually, you do need to read it, if you don't mind.
Okay. Subatomic particles and all matter made therefrom, including our cells, tissues, and bodies, are in fact patterns of activity rather than things. Yes, sir, question? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
String theory. It's beginning to sound like string theory.
Yes. It all ties in with this.
Yeah.
Thank you. On the back of your handout, on the last page, at the bottom is a list of references. It's actually a very small partial list. In the bottom of that list, you'll see 2 books by Tiller. The first book by Tiller is a fascinating read, and you don't need to be a physics major or a mathematician or anybody like that with a very strong scientific background to read it. It may help, but it's a very readable book, and it's a wonderful read in terms of understanding more about this phenomena. A quote by Albert Einstein. I think he understood this concept, maybe not to the extent that we do today, but he understood this concept decades ago when he said that matter is nothing more than energy vibrating at frequency low enough that we can perceive with our senses. Doesn't it always seem to lend a little credibility to what you're talking about when you can quote Albert Einstein? sort of bring him into the fold here. So what does this mean then in terms of what we actually see and touch and feel in our physical world? Well, Carla Hannaford gives us a sense of that when she says, so our senses are step-down transducers that slow and break down the vibrational continuum into tiny discrete pieces that can be analyzed by our sensory receptors and reassembled into a pattern in the brain. So this vibrational energy we see going on around us gets assembled in our brain, and we see it as a human being, as a wall, as a speaker, as a wire running on the floor, as whatever, a building, as a leaf on a tree. So it's amazing how these vibrational patterns exist in all this energy field around us and how our brain makes sense of it. But really, when it comes right down to it, we're nothing more than really energy. What's that song? We're nothing more than dust in the wind or something like that? But and then sort of expanding that notion a little bit further, William Tiller enters in with a comment. Again, this is from that first book on that list that you have in your references. Somehow the, quote, would-be, unquote, human has the intention, life force, and drive to come into material existence. So matter is transduced out of reciprocal space-time into direct space-time, and life begins.
What does transduced mean?
Basically condensed down, transformed in a sense. An easy way to think about it is if suppose you had a vast array of energy and you're sort of funneling it down into a different form. And the neurophysiologist, Dr. Ernest Holland, and I put a number of these quotes up here to kind of make it clear that it isn't just one or two people that are thinking this way. There's a whole vast array of neuroscientists, neurophysiologists, neuroanatomists, and physicists that are beginning to understand our world from this perspective and able to explain it this way. So Dr. Holland kind of offers his thoughts that our intimate thoughts, dreams, and desires are the result of electromagnetic field action on the brain and nervous system, which give rise to matter.
Does he mean that we're just receivers and not generators of our own thoughts, dreams, and desires?
Oh, we are generators of our own thought streams and desires, but the question is, where do those thoughts, dreams, and desires exist? They're actually energy that exists in the realm outside of what we would consider the physical or material world, direct time and space.
Okay, it sounds like that. Sounds like there's some electromagnetic forces just acting on the brain.
It's actually part of who you are.
Okay.
So you are, maybe a simple way to explain it is you encompass both a very dense as well as a very etheric energy structure, which if you want to consider encompassing many different domains, or at least a few different domains of the energy space, you do. You cross, like that picture showed, you cross. If you consider ourselves as mind, body, spirit, I think you exist in both domains. Before you reincarnate into a body, into the physical world as a spirit, you're probably hanging out in this realm here. And then you transduce, using that terminology from before, into the physical world. The theory there is, or the feeling that I've read, say books of Conversations with God and elsewhere, is that, you know, you're a spirit, basically you're a spirit inhabiting a body, but you're a spirit in desire of a physical experience. And so you're here experiencing the physical realm as a spirit. And you happen to take on this form to do it in. One point that's important to make here is that all of our thoughts and so forth, our dreams, our inspirations, are not caged inside of us, inside of our own head. Those thoughts and things exist and are emanated well outside of us, pretty much following up your question, is that all this is captured out into that reciprocal time-space domain, hence why it's so dense with energy. If you're interested in knowing more about Tiller's work and how it kind of came about, we can talk about that, at break or some other time. But he didn't necessarily have the thought that I need to go in there and try to prove or demonstrate that there's this reciprocal time-space domain out there. What happened for Tiller was, and Mr. Tiller, by the way, is Professor Emeritus at Stanford University. He's a physicist, but he's in the material science department, so he's extremely well versed on the physics of matter. He's been studying this for many, many years. But he was involved in many different experiments studying psychoenergetics. And what he was finding was that the physics models that are still pretty much in use today don't seem to hold up with this whole body of experimental data that's becoming more and more available. Experiments he's done as well as experiments as other people have done. Physics likes to look at things in a pretty nice, neat package, and its intention is to try to explain the physical phenomena going on in our world around us. And when those models no longer work, which is what Tiller has found, he's had to update them. And this led to his work in this realm here, and trying to create this mathematical construct. There's pretty much 4 kinds of force that are conventionally considered responsible for all the phenomena or observable phenomena that we look at in the universe today. There's the weak and strong nuclear forces, there's electromagnetic force, and there's gravitational force. And those forces are able to pretty much explain everything in our physical world, or so we think. But now along comes somebody who can do ESP, somebody who has psychic thoughts, somebody who has dreams, inspirations. How do you explain that? Well, before it was always considered as, I don't know, it just doesn't exist, or somebody makes it up, or it's a construct in our mind. Yes, sir?
I'm worried that science tends to ignore stuff that they can't have a conceptual model of how it works, like ESP and stuff. So I was wondering if anybody has bridged that gap with qualities in like quantum physics, like charm and strangeness, and mathematical qualities that are real esoteric to nobody. Has anybody done that in the scientific field to try to bridge that gap?
Tiller broaches that pretty well. And he talks about that in both the one book that was mentioned a minute ago and the second one that's listed on your reference sheet. And there's many other papers written on the subject as well. He's not the only person, but yes, that is being broached. So anyway, what's happened is that all these present models, I mean, the earlier standard model had to be updated when Einstein came along with the theories of relativity, and what else do we have? Well, relativity and quantum physics, actually. All the models had to be updated, and now they need to be updating again, which is again where Tiller comes along. Okay, so let's explore other energetic aspects of ourselves real quickly. We have this thing called an etheric body, which resides probably within about an inch, is the sort of standard thought process now, of your outside skin, your physical body. This is an electromagnetic or bioenergetic field, and it's a very high frequency. Some people might have a different name for it than etheric body, but that's pretty much the accepted. But the research that's been done on this is it shows this thing to be an energetic mapping of basically your physical body. And it exists there from the time you're in the embryonic stage, sort of spatial information. And the research that's been done, starting with Harold Burr back in the 1940s, has shown, he was doing some work on salamanders and just even seedlings, is that when he measured the energetic field, for example, of a seedling, he wouldn't see an energetic pattern of a seedling, he'd see the energetic pattern of the grown tree. Same thing with salamanders. He looks at the embryonic stage of the salamander, he would measure the electrical field, and he wouldn't see an embryo of a salamander, he'd see a full-grown salamander. And it turned out a few years later that Kirlian photographs from the Russian gentleman Kirlian were able to validate what he had seen by showing that electrical corona. Some of you may have seen Kirlian photographs. So we've been learning that, again, the physical body is so energetically connected and dependent on the etheric body for cellular guidance that the physical body cannot exist without the etheric body. It's believed that the etheric body contains a lot of the information for how to repair your body when it gets damaged. So you fall and break an arm, how does your body know to correct that and fix it? You scratch yourself, cut yourself, how does your body know how to actually go through and mend those wounds? That information, we believe, resides in the etheric body. That's discussed by Richard Gerber in his book, Vibrational Medicine, also mentioned in your references. We'll talk more about the energy anatomy a little bit later when we get into the energy medicine. But let's switch gears a little bit quickly to physical anatomy, keeping in the realm of energy here. We know and can measure that each cell and each organ in the body has a specific resonant frequency of about 7.8 to 8 hertz. Our alpha brainwave patterns are somewhere between 8 and 12 hertz. And ironically, which isn't so ironic, you note that the Earth resonance is about 7.83 hertz. It's been measured as high as 9, but it pretty much stays at around 7.83. But the Earth is an energy body much like we are, and it goes through its own evolution and changes and whatnot, so that is not necessarily a constant.
When you measure the resonance of the Earth, what are you measuring?
You're measuring the electromagnetic field. But you can actually get you can actually measure the field itself, and you can measure the frequency at which that wave, it's like a sound wave, really. You think of it that way. Some people actually hear the Earth's resonance as a sound. People who are very clairaudient, that gifted that way, they'll hear it as a sound. Well, that frequency that, as we measure it, on the Hertz scale is about 7.83. It's a very low hum, deep low hum.
Does it change during weather patterns or during earthquakes?
I think it can. I don't know enough about to be able to say that, but I believe it can change during weather patterns and earthquakes, yes.
Would it go up or down?
I'm sure it depends on the phenomena, but I'm not sure. But the point of this is that, comes in from a quote by Greg Braden, is that all life within the envelope of Earth's vibratory influence attempts to match base frequencies to that of the Earth. To this end, each cell in your body is constantly shifting patterns of energy to achieve harmonic resonance to the reference signals of our planet. So the fact that our organs and our cells try to resonate at something very close to the Earth resonance is not an accident. We try to match that because we have incarnated in here to be on this particular planet. And that's where we're most comfortable. We'll later see how important this is to energy healing and energy medicine. Is when you ground when you're actually grounded, you're centered, you are trying to match and get yourself into the Earth energy, into matching that. It's a very important technique to be able to do, and it's very easy to do. But what we find are that all bodily, chemical, and electrical functions in ourselves are influenced by the energetic input that goes on around us. For example, many people in the United States, they can match very well to the base frequency of around 60 hertz. That comes in from a musical note, that's about B natural, that B natural pitch. And that's because our electrical system is all 60 hertz. People in Europe match very well to a B sharp frequency, which is 50 hertz. Because that's the energy field around them that provides the electricity for their homes and their businesses.
How many hertz did you say you were?
60. So the energy running through these cords in our entire electrical system is all 60 hertz. So we match very well to that. We're very comfortable with that, just by virtue of the environment we live in. We're very, very sensitive, energetic beings, some people much more so than others. And we're very sensitive to incoherent energy. Many people have problems in fluorescent light. That's a very incoherent energy, and they get headaches from it, or they get certain visual impairments, or they just don't feel very good around it. Incoherent energy uses certain types of music, certain types of discordant sound can be very, if not damaging to people, certainly they can be very upsetting. There's been a lot of studies done in Japan on ultrasound and elsewhere in the world as well, and the impacts that has on the unborn fetus. People have maybe heard about that and read about that sort of thing. It's a controversial issue, But I know Dr. Mendelsohn thought that it may cause destruction of the DNA because of that incoherent energy being projected in such a small little energy being, the fetus itself. Okay. So let's leave a little bit of this realm of some of this science, but before we do that, we have to So if you can't read that in the back, what this says is, eventually Billy came to dread his father's lectures over other forms of punishment. So Dad here is going through all the science of throwing a ball through a window. And so if I bored you with all the science stuff, I apologize. But it'd be kind of interesting. Okay, so let's back to our premise. Again, we have an increasingly... Yes, sir?
Does it mean that then pregnant women should not undergo the sonography?
It's a controversial topic, is my understanding. Some people don't believe it has any impact or any effect on the unborn baby. Some people believe it does. And I think there's a lot of research going on in that field. There's been a number of studies done in Japan on this issue, and I understand. And then, again, the one Dr. Mendelsohn, in his book, this was many years ago, he wrote that he felt that it could have a destructive effect on the DNA of the body. And that it just delays development of the child. But at the time he said that, there wasn't as much known about it as there is today. So I can't really say whether it is or not. But it is an incoherent energy that's being projected as something. So it's not going to have no impact, but the impact may be so little that it isn't.
Which we don't know today.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there may be some people that do. I have not read anything lately about it. Somebody else, yes, maybe.
Peri and prenatal psychology people do believe that sonograms are detrimental to the fetus.
Okay, thank you.
That's what the research is showing now.
Did you hear that, sir? Would you mind standing up and saying that?
The prenatal and perinatal psychology people do believe that sonograms are detrimental to the fetus, and that's what their research is showing now. And they're proving it through regression therapy back into the fetal times that it does show that it is detrimental emotionally and to the DNA.
It means that our modern science and hospital people, they don't believe it.
Right, they don't believe it. Amniocentesis as well.
They are doing more harm than the good.
Yeah.
Let's, as we keep talking about the physical body, let's talk a little bit about the heart. The heart's probably the most critical organ in your body, not just because it circulates blood, but for various other reasons, most of them energetic. The electrical field of the heart has an amplitude of 60 times that of the brain. What that means by amplitude is the strength of its signal is 60 times stronger than that of the brain. It has the largest electromagnetic field in the body, and typically in most people extends 8 to 16 feet from your body. You can feel that. That field is 1,000 times greater than the brain. There's an interesting study that a woman, Dee Cotter, was involved in, or talked about in her book, that somebody done this experiment with children on a playground. And this is written about in Carla Hannaford's book. It's in the references, Awakening the Child Heart, which is an absolutely wonderful book, if you haven't read that. I received actually some of the material from tonight's talk from there. It was just fabulous. Anyway, in this particular study, these kids were playing in the playground. They're very young children, and their parents were sitting on the perimeter of the playground, not interfering with the play. Off beyond the playground was a soccer field. And the study had, kid-loving dogs walk up to, approach the playground. Other human beings that, just enjoyed kids and so forth, just walk up towards the playground. Kids didn't do anything, just kept on with their play. They didn't even notice anything. And the kids couldn't even see these things happening. All they did, they were all sort of behind a set of trees and so forth, so they didn't really know what was going on. Then they had a prosecuted child molester approach the field. Again, the kids never saw them, never heard a sound, and every single one of them ran to their parent. So the kids are reading something, they're picking up something, which is probably this significant incoherent energy coming out of this particular individual's heart. I mean, this is actual work that's been done. But it gives you the sense for just how important this organ is and just how immense its electromagnetic field is. We know that the heart has its own sensitivity and intelligence. When I say intelligence, is it used to be thought that the brain is what sent all these sensory signals down into the heart and instructed it what to do. If certain emotions got energized, again, the brain would tell the heart to beat faster, pump more blood, whatever the case may be. What we're finding is that it's totally opposite, is that the heart has all these sensory signals that go up to the brain, which then from the brain go out back down to the heart into various other organs throughout the body. So this emotional network in us is extremely strong and extremely powerful. Hence it has its own, again, sensitivity and intelligence. And what Carla Hannaford outlines in her book so beautifully is how an incoherent heart, and by incoherent I mean there's no consistency, there's no harmony to the beat itself. You know, if you're really distracted, chaotic, and frenzied and so forth, that would be an example of being incoherent from an energetic perspective. But an incoherent heart has a huge impact on the brain and leads to and actually creates an incoherent brain. And what we're finding is that this incoherence in the heart causes huge problems with people with mental disabilities, with learning disabilities, memory problems, all kinds of things. So we're finding that the emotions are having a huge impact on our learning ability. Especially, I mean, she's been doing this work with kids, and the impacts are unbelievable. Her point being is just how important, number one, the heart is, but how we conduct a lot of our life and how that affects our learning. Yes?
When you talk about the connections of the heart to the brain, are you talking about the nervous system or something else?
Yes. So as I sort of alluded to a second ago, an incoherent heart can and does lead to a lot of disease. And I use disease here as being, this covers a whole gamut of things, everything from psychological issues to physical types of disease, as well as emotional issues. It can start in the fetus with the mother and her connection to the child. A lot of incoherence in a mother with a fetus growing inside can have a huge impact, because at that stage in the development of the human being, you're developing a lot of your survival patterns. So the comment the woman made a few minutes ago about ultrasound and the impact it can have in repressive therapy, well, same thing can be happening with the fetus in terms of incoherence in the mother's heart or in the energy stream around them as they're growing. As an early child, where you're developing a lot of your own early notions of safety in the world, you're growing your emotional and imaginative self. You're formulating your early patterns for pleasure and learning. All these things happening at this stage in your life are dramatically impacted by any kind of incoherence going on around you. Parental feeling towards a child has a huge impact on your whole energy structure and your whole being. I think that's a pretty well understood connection. Family harmony, connection to others, they're all big parts of that. Where this sort of fits in with the heart is an interesting study done by Harvard University. It's a longitudinal study. Been going on for 42 years. The way the study worked was students who were graduating were asked in their 20s, among many things, but one of the questions asked was, do you have no, one, or two loving parents? And they were later checked in their 60s. And they found out that those that had answered I had two loving parents, 25% of them had heart disease. 35% had heart disease who had one loving parent. Those that had no loving parents, had 93% of them had heart disease. And the story doesn't stop there. They found out that 100% of the no loving parent group had life-threatening diseases of some sort, whereas less than 50% of those in the one or two loving parent group only had life-threatening diseases. And the story on this continues. I think people are probably well aware is that we've spent millions of dollars in this country, and I think appropriately so, but we've spent millions of dollars studying the risk factors of heart disease. Everything from high cholesterol diets, high blood pressure, smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, diabetes, genetic makeup, all those sorts of things. And yet what we find is that about half the people who suffer their first heart attack have none of these risk factors. And moreover, more than 80% of the people with at least 3 of these risk factors never have a heart attack. So there's more going on than just those issues. You know, there's an emotional component going on that's very critical.
So how can they call them risk factors if that's what the statistics show?
Well, they still have an effect. I think we've been able to show or demonstrate there's still an effect involved, but it's not the only thing going on. And it sort of leads to the issue of just how important is love and connection and community in our life. And again, how important that heart is in the impact it has on our health. Heart disease and depression are the 2 top diseases in the United States. Depression afflicts 3.4 million people who are 18 years and younger, and over 10 million adults. There's 65 million Americans who are diagnosed with mild to severe anxiety disorders, and they consume more than 5 billion doses of tranquilizers and sleeping pills a year.
How many did you say? How many did you say?
People, 65 million people.
And that's what? That's depression?
Severe anxiety disorders, you know. Stress is so chronic, Clea Richards kind of spoke to this last week. Stress is so chronic that 80% of the population eventually experiences lower back pain. 30 million people are hobbled with it at any time. So, as Dean Ornish has said a number of times, nothing is more powerfully affects our health than love, connection, and community. And I think some of these statistics tend to support that comment. Okay. So what's the mechanism for this? We can thank a number of different neuroscientists, starting with Candace Pert, starting back in the 1970s. She started to study what is this mind-body link. It used to be thought before that emotions are something that exists outside the body, have nothing to do with the physical body, and no impact on it at all. People like Dean Ornish and others are starting showing, you know, Deepak Chopra and so forth, and plenty of others for centuries have shown us that, hey, there is a big effect between emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, and the way our physical health is. But we could never find where that link was inside the body. We now know there's a very distinct and clear biological or biochemical link between the mind and body. Fascinating work done by, and it's outlined in this book, Molecules of Emotion. It's also in your references. But what happens is this. This is a cell right here in your body, imagine. And floating around in the cell membrane are hundreds of thousands of these things called receptors. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm not going to try to give you too much of an explanation, but there's all these receptors floating around. There are hundreds of thousands. And there's these things called ligands that float around in the extracellular matter around the cell. And they have to be keyed to a specific receptor. There's a lot of different types of receptors and a lot of different types of ligands. And if they do happen to match, as this ligands are floating around inside the extracellular tissue, they match here, and the whole receptor itself then dips down deep into the interior of the cell and causes all kinds of, you know, events to occur depending upon what the ligand is, what the receptor is, and what its impact would be on the cell.
Do ligands carry emotion in them?
Yes. So
Are they imprinted? And then the receptor carries that imprinting?
Exactly.
Emotional imprinting?
Exactly. Thank you. So basically, emotions exist in the body as chemicals, which is kind of a weird notion, but that's the ligand receptor link, and what goes on is that's what goes on in the body, is the body itself, or the emotions themselves exist in the body as these chemicals.
Does that include estrogen?
Well, the hormonal parts of it, you know, obviously play very strongly in this whole picture. So these minute physiological phenomena at the cellular level can translate into very large changes at the cellular level in both our behavior, physical activity, and our mood. All of a sudden, these things start commanding and directing everything from cell division to whether the cell secretes certain types of fluid, to whether the cell all the different physiological activities of the cell, and I'm stumbling on that. Yes?
Where are they produced? The biggest?
Largely in the brain, is my understanding. But what Candace has shown is that there's now a biological basis for our emotions, awareness, sensations, and even consciousness. Not that we didn't know that consciousness existed before, but was never explained in a biological or biochemical type of perspective. What this has given us is a much deeper understanding of memory storage in the brain and the body. Most memory actually is an unconscious type of activity going on with these receptors and ligands. And this whole notion of repressed memory and how those tend to work, especially with some of the energy medicine modalities, works very much in link with this whole model. Everything to do with repressed trauma, how that sort of thing works. Our perceptions of reality are distinctly influenced and affected by this, because they're affecting all cells in the brain, this whole receptor ligand type of phenomena. And it affects what we learn, the way we learn, and what we learn in our perceptions of what we believe is to be real. And it's how a lot of alternative healing therapies do indeed work. So what Candace Pert has now come to understand is that I've come to believe that virtually all illness, if not psychosomatic in foundation, has a definite psychosomatic component. The molecules of our emotions share intimate connections with and are indeed inseparable from our physiology. This offers a new way to think about health and disease, needless to say. And as I've said a number of different times, you wouldn't need to have told the shamans and the medical practitioners thousands of years ago that this was going on. They may not have understood it from this perspective, but they knew that these sorts of mechanisms were at work. And hence a lot of the healing modalities were in alignment with that. Hence the nature of that first quote that I showed. But we're now being able to at least understand it more from this scientific point of view. Now, a more complete picture of this story that I just showed you is as follows. Candace talks about what's going on specifically inside the body. What goes on outside the body to interfere or to join in with what's going on inside the body is incoming energy you've got all around you going on. So, and this could be anything from aspirations to insults to discordant energy of any kind, people yelling. I mean, it could be anything going on in your environment around you, either from another human or from a machine or anything. That's received an input by one of your chakras, there could be, or more than one. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. There's an actually very intricate webbing and linkage that goes on between the chakras via the nadis in the nervous system into the endocrine system.
What is the nadis?
Excuse me.
What is the nadis?
What is the nadis? It's this transmission pathway between the chakra and the endocrine glands. Actually, it kind of is this little filament type system that connects in with the nervous system. But each chakra is linked directly with, or energetically, to an endocrine gland or more. Those glands themselves secrete hormones into the blood, which is transmitted via the circulatory system to all the cells in the body. So how does an insult and injury from a parent lead to disease? It's very simple. This is the way it works.
The chakras, I understand, is not a physical structure.
No, it's not. That's part of your energy anatomy.
So then there's a transformation of the energy somehow at the chakra into a physical thing?
Via this system right here. Again, you're an energy body. You're nothing but vibrating energy. So it's just simply a transmission, a bit of a transducing, but a transmission that goes on from the receptor into the actual physical system, which again is nothing more than energy as well. Did that answer your question?
Well, you talk about the subtle bodies. You differentiate the subtle body energy from the physical body. And at the level of the nerves, the glands, is there also a parallel kind of thing happening? Or are you saying
They're actually linked in together. I mean, they overlap and they sort of transfuse together is the best way I can describe that.
Could you say quickly which chakras link to which glands?
Yes, the first chakra is linked into your adrenal glands. If you're writing this down, I can wait a minute. Okay, second chakra is into your sex organs. And they depend, of course, on whether you're male or female. Third chakra is into your pancreas. Fourth chakra into your thymus gland. Fifth is connected in through the thyroid and parathyroid. Sixth is the pineal. And the seventh is your pituitary.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, there's a question back here. Yes, sir.
I was telling the same way, nadis are not the anatomical structure. It is, as you said, it is a vibrational thing. Nadi, if you dissect the body, you won't find any nadi
Right.
Anatomically. So a person should know that it's not any anatomical structure.
Thank you. Yes. What the gentleman was saying is that the nadis are not an anatomical structure. You're not going to dissect somebody and, like a blood vessel, you're going to find one of these things. This is sort of where the miracle occurs. Remember that slide? But there is the direct link between these things, and energetically you can follow the pathway. Okay, well, a couple more things, then we're going to take a break. So at this stage, we sort of enter into the realm of energy medicine, and that's where we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and kind of dig into that a little bit further. But fortunately, when you get this kind of disharmony in somebody, and that disease can show up in a variety of different formats or different ways, whether it's psychological, whether it's emotional, or physical. When these things show up in our energy field, which again is really all we are, is big energy fields, they can be corrected. So we're not have to live with these issues that might go on. You can actually change that, change the energetic patterns. You can clear these things out and replace them with something that's more in harmony with your whole being. And from a biochemical perspective, Candace Pert found the same thing. Is that fortunately, however, the receptors are not stagnant and can change. This means that even when we are stuck emotionally, fixated on a version of reality that does not serve us well, there's always a biochemical potential for change and growth. So we'll go ahead and jump into some of these different energy medicine modalities and then focus specifically on intuition medicine. And what I'm finding is I didn't leave myself enough time to talk as much about it as I was hoping to, but we'll get into it somewhat. To those who've been practicing in this field for many, many years, this sort of validation and acknowledgement by the scientific community is more like what this slide maybe portrays, which you sort of have the caveman walking along, steps on the rake, knocks him in the head, and that's how tools are discovered, right? So this is a lot of these different energy medicine modalities are thousands of years old. Intuition medicine would be one of them. Intuition medicine isn't necessarily anything new as much as it's a registered trademark for the school that teaches us, the Academy of Intuitive Studies and Intuition Medicine down in Sausalito. If you look up their website, and if you want more information on that, I can tell you about that afterwards. Their mailing address is in Mill Valley. The actual school location's in Sausalito. So if I say Sausalito and you see Mill Valley, we're talking the same thing.
I don't see the website on our handout.
I think that was my omission. I apologize. It was in the promo for the talk, but the website address is www.intuitionmedicine, all one phrase, .org. So a lot of the energetic medicine modalities that we hear about today and we see being practiced, they really sort of seem to fall in the category of alternative medicine. And I think in fairness to them, they're not necessarily alternative. They may be alternative in terms of they're different from the conventional medical practices, but they're not necessarily alternative in terms of the effectiveness they can have. Some of these things are extremely powerful and can be very, very useful, both as standalone modalities for healing as well as accompanying what might be going on in the conventional medicine world. I'm going to briefly pass through these things just to give at least some acknowledgement to the vast nature of energy medicine. Acupressure and acupuncture are certainly two different types we've all heard of. I mentioned here in acupuncture there's 5 element. Acupuncture kind of took a fork in the road, as I understand it, at least as it's practiced today. There's a 5 element practice in the traditional Chinese medicine practice. Most people who are in acupuncture practicing the traditional Chinese medicine approach. But back at the Cultural Revolution, back in the 1950s, they tried to dig in, what I understand from talking to a 5 element acupuncturist, is they try to take spirit out of the medical traditions, much like Descartes did back 300 years ago in Western medicine. And so by removing the spiritual element and the emotional element from acupuncture, you got more of what is the form of acupuncture that works predominantly on the physical body with not only the needles, but also with herbs and so forth. This doesn't mean to say it's not effective or useful. That's not true at all. It's very effective and useful and a wonderful healing modality. But that's the difference between the 5 element. The 5 element includes mind, body, and spirit all as part of a holistic approach to healing. So each of the different meridians actually has an official or a spirit associated with it that governs how that meridian works and what goes on inside their body. Each of the different acupuncture points, most of them are similar or the same as the traditional Chinese medicine meridian points, but there's some differences. All the points have a spiritual name to them because they have a spiritual effect on the body, because the tradition looks at the body, looks at the human as being very holistic, as complete. So when you're healing the body, you're healing the spirit. When you're healing the spirit, you're healing the body. It's all one unified thing. There's Ayurveda, of course, bioenergetics, biofeedback, all very useful. Body work encompasses a whole bunch of different things, as anybody who works in that field that might be present could certainly attest to. And some of the different forms of it, as I understand it, are listed here. I won't go through the whole list of them. But many of these can have tremendously beneficial effects on people. There's an energy medicine practice called Chakra Balancing. I can include that sort of thing in the work I do, but we generally go much further than just balancing the chakras. We go a lot further as to why the energy even got there and how to get it out and prevent it from coming back. Chiropractic is certainly a form of energy medicine. Working with colors, crystals, light therapy, those are all forms of energy, as you know. And color therapy, light therapy can be tremendously impactful on people. How many times have we had an emotion evoked just by virtue of looking at a particular color? It just strikes us in a certain way. So there you have a simple example of energy medicine at work of a frequency, that is the color, which is an energy, impacting your energy body. Cranial sacral therapy can be extremely powerful. I've seen it exercised by an osteopath, and it's unbelievable the effect this can have. I have such tremendous respect for what these people do. Dance, music, sound, tone, art therapy, all can be very helpful. In the dance world, you may have heard of Gabrielle Roth, some people. It's a wonderful form of energy medicine in the 5 rhythms. Wonderful, wonderful format. My wife used to work with her. Homeopathy and flower essences, I kind of include those together because in a sense, Bach's flower essences are a form of homeopathy. Intuition energy medicine, I'll get into in a second. Working with magnets can be extremely helpful, especially with arthritis, other types of joint issues, as well as organ type things. Meditation, prayer, guided imagery, visualization, extremely, extremely powerful forms. A couple of things I want to mention about that. Many people in here may already have a meditation practice of some sort, and so you already know how impactful meditation and prayer, visualization can be. If you're not aware of that, Norman Cousins, for example, reported once that he had broken his elbow. I think it was playing tennis or something like that. He was able to heal that broken elbow in record time by focusing for 20 minutes a day on increasing the blood flow through the injured joint. He was told by his doctor that the elbow receives very little blood, so the healing takes a lot longer. And just by simple meditation, focused intention, 20 minutes a day, the joint healed much, much quicker. So there he's complementing the body's already natural process. Cardiologists Michael Cooper and Michael Argent did an experiment on a group of men with very elevated cholesterol levels. Cholesterol levels were measured between 300 and 500. These men were cardiac patients, with a lot of other serious diseases. They trained these guys to sit quietly for 15 minutes each day, only 15 minutes, and clear their minds. Any thoughts that came up, they would just sort of let them pass through. Just a simple meditation exercise. Almost immediately, the cholesterol level dropped by 1/3 in these people. That's impossible in today's world without, there's only one drug they know of in terms of a drug therapy that can accomplish that same feat. But this is just sitting 15 minutes a day, and it happened in a very short time after this started. A double-blind study was done. Here's the effect of prayer for you. And there's actually been many different studies on prayer. A double-blind study was done whereby 1/2 of a large group of heart attack patients were prayed for by a group of people. The physicians, the family members, the patients themselves didn't even know this was happening. All the people that were doing the praying, all they were giving were the first names of the people. And again, the medical staff, the patient themselves, families, nobody knew anything about the study being conducted. But the patients who had the praying being done for them fared much better than the not prayed for patients. It's a huge difference in the recovery and the benefit. So in case you had any second thoughts about it, don't underestimate the power of your own prayer and your own meditation, and in particular your own intention. We have this drilled into us in school that energy follows thought. And you read that same notion, that same thinking in the Conversations with God books and other types of spiritual related books, and it's very, very true. Your intention is extremely, extremely powerful. Osteopathy, shamanism, qigong and tai chi, transpersonal psychology. Now you're starting to tie in the spiritual element in with some of the psychological elements. It's a whole new field, I guess, of psychology called transpersonal. It's sort of related to some of these things. So there's a wide array of different modalities that can be very, very helpful to you. And I'm not here to try to tell you which one is better or worse for different situations. I think it's a very personal choice. So, yes, sir.
Isn't it true that various individuals, various techniques work better for different individuals?
Yes, I think that's
Tai Chi and a magnus
right.
will work better for them, but not so well for anybody else.
That's my understanding as well, yes.
Okay.
I mean, somebody who really responds well to movement and dance may find that a dance therapy is going to be much more effective for them than sitting down with an intuitive like myself and going through and having the energy manipulated and moved for them.
And you have to find what's good for you. You have to hunt around until you find
Trust your own sense about it. By all means, rely on your own feeling for what would be appropriate. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell something about the tachyon energy? In one of your, diagram?
Yes.
On that part, tachyon energy field, and I know there's tachyon therapy also. Do you have anything to say about that? I said the field of the...
You know, I'm ignorant of the tachyon therapy. I don't know anything about that. So I'll have to learn some more about that. So let's focus a little bit on intuition energy medicine. And I'm including the way we're not only taught it at school and the way I practice it right now in my own practice. It's applied and used at really all three different levels: mental, spiritual, and physical levels. Here, disease is viewed as a manifestation of the entire person. It's not something that happens in the physical body and unique only to the physical body. There's typically a spiritual orientation, a spiritual component to it. The intention here is to, and what does happen is it addresses a variety of different types of issues. It isn't just a physical healing art. It deals with the spiritual, psychological, emotional, and mental issues. And a few case studies I can present to you can kind of talk about that. What I like about the practice is the intention isn't just to go in and try to clear an energy field, say a distraught chakra, or clear out your grounding system, or work on your auric system, or if you've got body reprogramming and suppressed memory issues that can be cleared out, just to clear those things out and be done with it. The intention is really to get to the cause for why it's there. That's assuming that the client wants to go that far with it. Because many times in certain types of energy medicine modalities, not always, but many times, the energy can be cleared out and then it comes back. Maybe not immediately, but over time, because the original cause, the energetic charge that keeps it there or brought it there to begin with, hasn't been removed. So I like to get to the cause of the whole thing and not just work on the symptom. It's a hands-off healing modality, in that sense non-invasive. It is certainly invasive from an energetic perspective, but it's not invasive from a standpoint of cutting into the physical body. It's easily done in person or remotely over long distance. Most of my clients don't live locally. Most of my clients live all around the country, and including a person overseas. So it's all done over the phone. But the reading of the energy and the manipulation of it is just as effective. So again, it can be done either way, in person. A lot of people like to do it in person because they like to be there in presence and do it, and that's just great. That's just fine. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're trained to work with several different body local energy systems. I'll mention those in just a minute, as well as several different spiritual systems. So there's the physical body, there's an energetic anatomy on top of that, and then in addition to that, you've got the whole spiritual realm and the whole spiritual aspects, which are involved in usually the manifestation of whatever difficulty or disease they're having. In terms of some things about how it works, I myself will be in meditation basically to focus the mind. If you're going to manipulate and move the energy and read it, you've got to be very, very focused. So it's a meditative thing. The client can either be in a meditative state or just certainly sit very quietly. I think a very key aspect of the energy medicine practice that we conduct, and we're taught this very, very strongly from the very beginning, is to maintain an energetic separation from the client. A lot of hands-on work, there's a lot of transference of energy that goes on. And that may work fine for some people. Our intent here is not to do that. So there's a definite protocol that you maintain the energy separation. And that's easily done if you set yourself up properly. Because if you're doing intuitive work and you're reading energy and you're merging your energy system with somebody else's, who are you really reading? Yourself or them? And you're not going to be much help to them if you're reading your own stuff. You might have a nice time, but you're not going to really do much for everybody else. In terms of the information and guidance that's gathered, there's obviously verbal discussion with the client. What's the issue they would like to address? What's going on for them? And then there's discussion, at least for me, throughout the whole session, the whole consultation. It's not like it's a completely quiet type of thing. I also talk with the client's spirit pretty extensively. The client may say, this is what's going on for me, this is what I need some help with. Is their spirit matching that? Is their spirit saying the same thing? And many times they are a little differently, or many times they're not, or sometimes they're not. Because when we speak, we filter that information very clearly, or very diffusely in a lot of different ways. And so the spirit is pretty clean in terms of what's going on and what they would like some help with. And that gets exchanged with the person. This is what your spirit's saying. Does that make sense to you? Is that what you'd like to be doing? Is that the direction you'd like to go? So nothing is ever done, at least in my practice, without agreement and the choice being made by the client themselves. So the energy fields are read, conversation goes on with the spirit, and then other information and guidance is gathered literally with working with the divine. God is usually brought in all the time with it. You can call it God, Great Spirit, whatever term you like to use. But there's a whole envelope and sacred space created where all this sort of information and guidance is coming from. It's an extremely, extremely sacred practice, I find. Most energy medicine is very much a sacred spiritual practice as much as it is an energetic practice, in my opinion. So there's a lot of diagnostic work that's done initially for a few minutes, and then you get into, okay, this is what I'm seeing, this is what seems to be going on. Do you want to dig into this further? the information I'm getting about where this may come from, so-and-so is in your space, or you're attracting this, or you're behaving or doing these kinds of things. Does that make sense to you? Yes or no? And then if they want to dig into it further, which is generally the case, we go into further as to find out where that may be coming from. Where's the origin, where's the source of these issues for people? That may, if need be, it may end up being spiritual issues get resolved at the karmic level. And there's a whole realm of different spiritual things that can go on here. Access to the Akashic records is done if need be. All kinds of things can go on to help with the person's own healing at the spirit level. Once the spirit level tends to be resolved, I find the energy level healing and the physical healing happen very quickly and almost automatically. Not completely, but almost. Because the charge that keeps it there for many people is very much a spiritual type of thing. And if you can resolve that for people, if that's the origin, it may not be the issue right now for them, then you can make tremendous headway. Again, in accordance with the client's choice, their energy fields are changed using only their personal energy, personal healing energies and universal healing energies. So my energy is not used here in trying to create any kind of healing. I think that would be inappropriate and breaks the bounds of integrity. You all have your own personal healing energy, actually many, several that you run. They work just fine. You can call upon them anytime you want, especially once you learn how to do it, to activate and ignite your own energy in your own healing. I don't consider myself a healer. I would consider myself more as a facilitator. I sort of activate that healing potential inside each of you. And it's amazing what people take off and do. Yes, sir?
So how do you access people's spiritual issues?
Talk to their spirit.
How do you do that?
In meditation, I just, say hello to their spirit and we start talking. And you're in meditation, you actually can see the spirit, usually as an energy body. And I hear it as a voice, and I ask for it to talk to me as a voice. Some people can see it as color, some people can see it as imagery, sound. The energy can be seen in a lot of different modalities or
So is that something that's teachable, or is that something you were taught to do?
I don't consider myself this born gifted, intuitive. I didn't realize at 5 years old that I was this prodigy and had all this great talent and so forth, and this was my life's path, and here I go. This was only something I came upon, 5 years ago, and I went into practice only a little over a year ago. But what I do consider myself is to be highly trained, and that's where the academy came in, is that you're taught how to do that. The physical body isn't ignored, and for some people they may find they need to go into other physical energy medicine practices or modalities that assist the physical body in integrating the work that's done. Your spiritual and energy anatomy move fast, and they can clear quickly because the energy is much more etherical relative to the density of the physical body. But the physical body can be assisted along with the process here, and if need be, you can call upon some of the other body therapies to assist with that. And again, I mentioned the Academy of Intuitive Studies. Here's the 7 different systems that we work with, and I'll take you through them quickly. We could spend, this is a 2-year body of work, and so we could spend, a whole night on just any one of these things. But I'll show you where these reside in yourself, but I want to reinforce over and over again that anybody in here can learn this if you wish to. You don't have to go through a 2-year course of study, but I make it a very strong point in the work I do with clients is to teach them along the way what's going on so they can do a lot of this for themselves. And they can do most of it for themselves. Sometimes they get into spiritual issues or certain types of physical issues where it's helpful to have somebody guide them through it. But by and large, just maintaining a healthy energy system, you can do that yourself with very simple daily, weekly practice. This is nothing that is unique to somebody like myself or who's been trained in the profession. You're all very gifted at this and can do it with just a little bit of awareness mostly. So we have a grounding system, an auric life force, earth energy system, chakra system. These are things that you may have heard of already. There's a Kundalini meridian system, a male-female, as we call it, system, spiritual incarnation system, which has Huge impact on just your spirit coming into your body. It deals with a lot of possession issues that people go through and can have, especially very severe possession issues, possessed by another spirit. Crazy as that may sound, it happens all the time. And a physio-psychic system which deals with cellular reprogramming in the body. Let me show you where some of these reside, and then I'm going to refer to some things in your handout that you can look at maybe on your own time if you want. You don't have this picture here. Anybody that wants copies of these, I'd be happy to get them for you. But you do have this in your handout, would say symptoms of poor grounding and energy medicine, or in this case, symptoms of poor grounding and poor earth energy flow. I'm not going to read through these because these are in your handout. So I'll save ourselves a little bit of time. This doesn't mean to say that if you have any one of these symptoms, this is your issue. What I find in energy, in the energy work that I do, is that there's no absolute and no fixed, pre-planned approach to how you correct an issue. Somebody come and say, oh, I've got pain in my chest, and I would say automatically, oh, that means you got a fourth chakra issue. It's either a love problem or this, that, or the other. It doesn't work that way. It can be that, and there's tendencies that way, but it can be a lot of different things. Your energy works in very interesting, also manipulative, but very, Senios type ways that go all over your space. So I have no canned approach as to what might happen. But in your grounding system, this is without question the single most important and powerful technique that you can learn how to do in all of energy medicine. The other systems that are mentioned down here, the physio-psychic, spiritual incarnation, and so forth, these are all very important and they can have a huge impact with people. But if you did nothing but focus on keeping your grounding very clear and maybe brush up your aura and so forth once in a while, you'd have a huge impact on yourself. And many of you are doing this already, probably unconsciously. But the grounding is so important because this is your connection into Earth. This is your connection into matching that Earth resonance and keeping yourself, your spirit, grounded and centered into the physical plane that we're on right now. You don't have to be grounded if you don't want to. There's no law that says you have to be, but it can have a huge impact on your physical as well as your mental health. People that tend to be very spacey have a hard time co-creating in the world, have a hard time manifesting, can have a lot of grounding related issues. But the grounding paths that we learn and set up, there's a very important one that comes from your root chakra or first chakra down. It's what we call kind of a grounding anchor point. Then outside, then down through your feet chakras as well. We find it very important to ground, again, if you wish to, your meditation sanctuary, which for most people tends to sit in the center of your head. Doesn't have to, but that's where it is for most people. It's sort of the sacred place where your spirit can reside inside yourself. Those are the key grounding anchor points. Your whole aura, which is sort of shown here, should be grounded as well. And there's simple exercises you can go through to make sure you're doing that, and to the point where you can just sort of make it happen automatically. What I was hoping we'd have time for tonight was just do a simple grounding exercise. You can do it in 10 minutes or less, just to feel that sensation if you haven't had it already. But you can get a long way just by using your own intent. Intend yourself to be grounded all the way to the center of the earth. Imagine you're sending electrical current that can have the shape of a big tree trunk, a waterfall, a cascade of diamonds, a spike into the earth. But keep yourself there. Any kinds of those visualizations or metaphors can be very helpful. So there's a system there that, if disrupted, can have a huge impact on people's health. If you look at your aura life force energy is your own personal energy signature. Like your fingerprint, everybody has a unique life force frequency or energy. So it's sort of like your spiritual identity, if you will. Not your spiritual identity, but your sort of your own personal identity. That force tends to come in through your top of your 7th chakra, right down. into your root chakra or first chakra. There it mixes with earth energy coming up through your open feet chakras, up through your leg channels. That mixture then creates a very healthy mix, which then gets sort of distributed throughout the rest of the body. You can manipulate your life force energy to down in here to run more life force or less life force, more earth energy, less earth energy. The earth energy tends to have the effect, this is again bringing up that earth resonance, 7.83 hertz, and it tends to have a cleansing effect when brought up. And so much of your energy flow is in a downward way and collects down here in the first and then drops down, if you're well grounded, into the earth. Keeps you cleaned out from an energetic perspective. Or I should say helps you to do that. The life force energy is sort of like the polisher. It comes through and kind of polishes you up, but fills you with your own, again, energy signature. Life force kind of comes up. It tends to go out around, the shoulders, down your arm channels, out your hand chakras. And again, there's some symptoms of what you can happen for you both emotionally as well as physically if these systems need some assistance. Your aura is shown here. Your aura is your basically your psychic skin. And for most people, it extends at least a foot outside of your body. It can certainly extend a lot further. But it protects and shields your energy system. It's what tries to differentiate you from other people. It's a pretty important boundary to kind of keep in place. Most illness starts outside the auric layer, comes in through that, in through, like I had in the diagram, an open chakra or elsewhere. It's not the only input that can be received in from. But it's very important. The outside layer of this is sort of what we call a protection layer. Your aura has 7 layers, much like you have 7 chakras, at least in the body local area. Each chakra basically is what creates that individual layer of the aura. So your first chakra, its emission creates basically the first layer of your aura, which is right next to your skin. That's a very important layer for your immune system. So a lot of immune system disorders and things like that can oftentimes be either first chakra related and or first auric layer related, or other things too. And I'm sorry to be going through this so quickly and not maybe answering too many questions. This is a slide that you don't have copies of, but again, I'd be happy to give you if you want. This sort of outlines the different chakras. And this just shows the main ones. There's more than this. But the main ones are certainly the first through the 7th that sort of align with the chakra meridian right up your back, starting with the root chakra at the base of your spine all the way to the 7th chakra, which tends to project out the top of your head. The model we've been used for chakra, we were taught with chakras is it sort of shows here, is sort of, it doesn't have to be this way with everybody, but more of like a conical type shape. The chakra can open or close, much like, say, a vegetable strainer. So you can modulate the degree of openness. A lot of balancing, when people talk about chakra balancing, a lot of times that means just calibrating the chakras to specific openings. There's some teaching that says each of the chakras has a specific color associated with it. We find that not to be the case at all. You can have any kind of energy running into those. So you have hand chakras and you have feet chakras. And you have telepathics up here all around your head. And then there's little minor chakras, one in the center of your forehead, different from the 6th. It's in what we part of the physio-psychic system we call the analyzer. You have little minor chakras around your knees, some in your shoulders, and a few other places. There's a Kundalini energy meridian, which starts at the key meridian is at the base of the spine, runs up through the 7th chakra. And then there's also minor meridians that run up from the feet all the way around out through to the hands. It's a very powerful energy. Those that have worked with it, I'm sure have found that to be the case. There's a system we call the male-female system. There's sort of it looks here as a triangle, but it's really a funnel, just because it's three-dimensional, a funnel-type shape that contains the energy, has a great deal to do with our ability to create in this world, not only another human being, but when you're not doing that, just be able to be, for creative expression in your own life. But there's what we call the male-female triangle or funnel here that contains a lot of the male-female energy. And then you have meridians that run up that carry the male and then the female. And everybody's a little bit different. Some people carry it on the left side, some people carry it on the right side, whether it's your male or female. The meridians come up into the pineal gland, up into the pituitary, and then back down into the triangle. And keeping that a good, fluid, harmonious flow can make a huge difference in somebody's ability to create. A lot of fertility type problems, reproductive types of issues people can have can be contained in that system, as well as just creating. There's a male version and there's a female version, needless to say, but they're both very similar. The center of the triangle is usually about the second chakra, and then it comes down at the apex down here is about the first chakra. So it includes those two chakras. That's a very important, powerful system. And then there's the last one I'll mention is the spiritual incarnation system. I didn't draw it here, but that system has a meridian that runs starting with two antennae at the top of the seventh chakra. It comes down, basically the main meridian runs all the way down to the first chakra. At this point here is where your direct voice is. And then there's channels that come down into the arms where your direct writing circuit is. Now what I mean by that is that people who are able to actually channel other spirits, people like Edgar Cayce and other channelers who channel other information from other sources, and their voice may change. You may, if you've ever heard these kinds of people work or talk, they're bringing in that other entity, that spirit, through this meridian. And a lot of possession issues, whether it's minor or major, can inflict people with throat type issues because they're not able to speak their own voice, their own spirit. They're talking somebody else's stuff, whether it's enforced on them or whether they're inviting it in, whatever the case may be. You find with many channelers, they don't live as long a life as most people. The reason being is that it's a harsh insult to our physical body to be running other than our own incarnated energy. You're not made to do that. It can be done, and it is done, but again, it's very harmful. It tends to be very harmful in the body. Direct writing the same way. Some people are able to channel through their art, through their writing, through whatever, other ulterior sources for, their gift. And that's the channel in which that works. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just that if people are having issues with wrists, hands, arms, shoulders, it can be related to those systems. We're at 9, Hearn. Should I stop or give a couple briefs?
We can take a few questions and officially stop at 9, but we can keep going as long as there's people here that want to listen to what Chuck has to say. So we're not going to just give him the hook or anything. Plenty of good information. Maybe you can take half a dozen questions. We've got a microphone. We'd like to take questions, and then you have questions. Well, hold the wireless mic so that we can get it with video or make a video tape.
If you're interested in some examples or case studies, I can do that. I never do that with people that live in the area that I'm talking in. So I would never give an example of the way this work might be for somebody that would live anywhere in this area. So any case study I might present, of course I'd never use the person's name, but it would be somebody who lives completely out of state. But if you're interested in, so give me an example how this might work, that can be done. I'm not asking you to necessarily. We've sort of gone through what's sort of the science behind it, what are the different meridians and so forth, but bottom line is how can this help people? And that's my enjoyment with it, is that, how it can actually help people. Yes?
What would happen to that male-female system with a hysterectomy?
That's a good question. The question was, what can happen to that male-female system with a hysterectomy? If you're retaining any energetic charge from that, and it's different for everybody, or could be, if to your own system physical system, your emotional system, whatever it was, it felt like a big insult. And you're retaining the negative, a negative insult or a negative, footprint, so to speak, from it, energetic imprint from it, then it could definitely disable it or cause it to be sort of dysfunctional. So now your female energy isn't running nearly as well as, say, your male energy would be. All of us run both male and female energy. We're not just, even though we came into this world physically as a male or female, we all still run male and female energy. Not necessarily 50-50, it may run 70-30 or something like that, and there's no right or wrong that it should be. Some males run more female energy than male energy. They may run 50-50, they may run a much stronger level of male energy, and the same thing for women. But you may have a disruption to that flow into that entire system. And that can manifest itself in all kinds of different issues, whether it's self-esteem, compassion, love type relationship type issues. This system deals a lot with relationship, mostly within yourself. It starts with your inner male-female relationship, and then it manifests outward into. So people who are having relationship issues, say you have a hard time relating to males or females, regardless of whether you're a male or female. A lot of times this is your own inner struggle going on with your inner male, inner female. And that's where the resolution takes place to assist you with your own inner relationship and thereby your own outward relationship.
I noticed it was connected directly to the pituitary. So could that have an effect on the pituitary?
Absolutely, and it does. And all the hormonal secretions that come out of the pituitary. So it doesn't mean that there is because you've had that surgery or somebody may have had that surgery done. It just means that it's a possibility. Yes, sir.
I'm interested in hearing or learning the grounding exercise that you talked about. If there's time for that.
Okay. For those that may want to stay, if we got Hearn's permission, we can maybe do that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you talked about spiritual incarnation system, and somebody can, is it by will or somebody can do by will, or it is automatic, or somebody can be trained into it, and what is your personal experience?
With the spiritual incarnation system? Usually with most things in energy is that you can't be, this is not completely an absolute, but it's by and large it's pretty close to one, is that nobody can get in your space energetically unless you want them to, unless you invite them in. You may be doing it unconsciously, but you got to be inviting it in somehow, whether it's karmically, past life related in some fashion due to some relationship that was going on, or otherwise. And so if somebody's definitely insulting somebody through their spiritual incarnation system and a lot of possession type stuff, this is very true with a lot of abused people. Kids who have gone through some very severe child abuse can easily become possessed by the abuser, simply because the child says, I've had enough of this, I'm leaving. And they actually leave the body. They may hover close by it, but the abuse is just too much, and the abuser takes over. And all of a sudden the kid becomes, the behavior radically changes, their facial expressions, their whole face can change. You can see it in their eyes. Eyes go very black, or can. That's a very severe case. I mean, that's a pretty major case of it. But it's common in people who are going through severe abuse type stuff. Or a minor possession where the abuser may come and go, and the person, maybe during the abuse time or something like that, the spirit may come and go, and somebody takes over. So in that case, the child isn't likely inviting us in, especially on a conscious level. This is happening to the poor person. But there's something going on, typically karmically, that can be dealt with. If it's a karmic issue, I'm not saying it has to be. I have a young girl I'm working with. It's not that type of issue, but she all of a sudden started to see weird things in her eyes. And she'd be looking at things, and all of a sudden she'd get these blank spots. She couldn't, she'd be looking at a picture or something like that, and she'd get these blank spots in her eye. All of a sudden, the field of vision had these, darkened out spots. She just couldn't see as well anymore. So she went to an ophthalmologist and all kinds of opticians and studies and so forth, and they couldn't find anything of the optic nerve, or the eyes seemed to be working properly. They couldn't seem to find anything. And so I worked with her. We looked at the whole issue, and it turned out for her that she was a pretty intuitive little kid. She's only 5 years old, and it was her dad's energy that was invading in her space. She used to call her dad on a bunch of stuff that she didn't like, that she could see pretty much intuitively with her dad, the way he tended to behave and stuff like that with them. It wasn't necessarily outwardly abusive as much as it was just the way he conducted themselves around them, and she would, or the way he just sort of carried on with his life. She sort of could see stuff and would bring it out to him, and he didn't like it. And he would scold her for it many times outwardly when these sorts of things would come up, but energetically, and largely unconscious to him, but energetically, he was trying to block her sight. And so he got imprints in the back of her sixth, big cording, this whole energetic system called cords. You can cord in the back of somebody's sixth chakra. That's where she was. She had some headache issues, but it was largely an optical thing for her. So the healing there that took place was to make her aware of this to the extent that you can with a 5-year-old. Her mother was involved with the exchange and the work that was being done. I wouldn't work with a child unless the parent was involved. Her dad was made aware of this, so he could potentially change his behavior, so he wouldn't have this impact on her. And then she was taught that and then he was worked with spiritually as well. But she was taught that if she's seeing these things, don't say them to dad. But that doesn't mean you hold it inside, because all you can do is repress the stuff, and if you're not flowing the energy, then it's going to get stuck someplace, or it could. Energy wants to flow, and when you're feeling something, it's usually stuck, so you get it out. So in her case, the teaching was, if you're seeing stuff that you don't like about dad, draw it. She couldn't write. She was just a 5-year-old, so she couldn't, write it down, but she could draw it. So move it through your system, get it out of your space. And so she would just draw, and then she may throw the picture away. She may show it to mom or something like that, but that's working with mom and dad on that issue. But at least she was moving the energy out, and then she wouldn't inflict dad with it. And it seemed to be helping. She lost these spots that she was seeing in her vision and stuff like that. Now there's a simple case of what you might call possession, but it wasn't through the spiritual incarnation system.
Why I asked, because I have got one client who has got spiritually quite advanced person, but got some ensnaring from different entities, and she gets different times, some accident due to that, or she suffers a lot at times.
If I understood you right, what you're asking is, can these entities come from someplace else, even out? Go ahead.
She always says that out of the blue, sometimes I'm driving on the I-5 or somewhere, and suddenly entity comes and snares me, we are going to kill you, and something happens, and she meets with some problem.
She hears the spirit talking.
You hear the spirit talking to you. Do you feel it? Do you feel it physically inside yourself?
Yeah, she feels inside.
She.
Oh, I'm sorry. She does. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Not me. She feels.
Okay. It could be very possible she's coming in that way. Yes. The spirit doesn't necessarily have to be coming into her. It can be sending the messages and she's picking them up telepathically, or it can be sending the messages in through her own, say, sixth chakra, for example, that she's picking up on it, or her fifth, actually anywhere, and she's just sort of sensing it, feeling it, but yes, the spirit can be taking over. But generally what happens is there's a dispossession taking place when there's that kind of possession happening, is you're being moved out and that's coming in. If not partially, then completely. So yes, that could be happening for her. It could be a lot of different things, but yes. Excuse me, I didn't understand what you were saying.
And you were saying before that nothing can come into your space if you don't let it in, so that's the person
some form of them is definitely doing that, yes. As a rule. I mean, there's exceptions, I think, to everything, but as a rule, our understanding is that what we look for is, we don't just say, oh, geez, mom's in my space again, she's causing me these headaches, giving me this kind of problem, making me behave this way, making me feel guilty, emotional, whatever the case may be, if that's happening. Bad mom, don't do that ever again, kick her out, all that kind of stuff. You can do all that, but the fact of the matter is what are you doing to draw it in? And you can't necessarily affect the other person's energy if they don't want it to be. You can have a chat with their spirit if you want and sort of understand what their role is in the whole thing, but if they don't want to change, they don't have to change. So you got to find out what's the hook inside me. Why am I bringing it in and inviting it in or letting it happen? What's my charge and role in this whole thing? And you try to change that if you wish to. It's always your choice, and to avoid it from happening, so that whatever, I'm using the analogy of mom, if mom says something that really gets me fired up and knocks, kind of kicks me around, takes me off center, is that she can say all those things anymore. It doesn't have that same impact. It just goes by. Any other questions?
If there are no more questions, that's it. Let's have a round of applause for Chuck for such a great discussion.
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted, and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.